I've had this old random orbital sander for, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years. Got a lot of good use out of it, and it still runs good, but the cord on it's got dinged up just a little bit. So I decided to replace the cord on it, and the sound on it wasn't very good. It was raining off and on while I was doing it, and on top of that, well, it just wasn't that interesting. So I decided instead what I'd do is I'd just tell you one of my favorite stories. This one has to do with neighbor Donnie. I've told a few stories about him, and just so you remember, or the new folks that are here who may not be acquainted with neighbor Donnie, he was what I would refer to as the best housewife on the block. He wasn't too good with mechanic tools, and basically anything that was mechanical, well, let's just say he was better off with a kitchen spatula in his hand than he was a garden trowel. Neighbor Donnie was really a nice guy. He's what I would refer to as being a gentle soul. Didn't raise his voice, didn't get too excited about things, and he knew when he got in over his head into a project that he wasn't above asking for help. In one of the previous stories I told, had to do with Donnie ran into a little issue where he was trying to put the chain on his son's bicycle, and that project just kind of outgrew him. So this is like a couple weeks later this happened. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it was a couple weeks after that, I suppose. But anyway, Donnie had bought his son a new bicycle. And the bicycle threw a chain. I helped him put the chain on the bicycle. But anyway, Donnie's son, well, the way the house, let's explain this first. The way the house was situated was that we shared an alley between our backyards, okay? And he had a gate and a chain link fence, and I didn't have a fence. I just pulled off the alley and would pull my truck right up in the yard from time to time. Didn't normally park it there. And one day, I did that. I just pulled up that alley and just pulled it in there because I was gonna load up tools the next morning so I could come out here and start working on Sassafras Valley. We'd just bought the property at that time. So I just pulled it in there and parked it overnight. So next morning, it was fairly early, let's say, along about 8 o'clock, something like that. And I went out and I loaded all the stuff up into my pickup because I was going to be basically cutting wood and clearing brush all day, and backed it out of that driveway and headed down to the corner about a couple blocks away to the little convenience store they had down there, and I was going to get me some chainsaw gas. And I got down there and I realized I'd forgotten my gas can. So turned around, went back, parked it in the backyard, grabbed that gas can, put it in the back, and I got to thinking, I ought to go ahead and fix me a cup of coffee because, I was back home. The coffee pot was right there. So I went inside, and my wife had just finished drinking the coffee out of the pot, and so I sat down there and we waited for a new pot to brew. And while we did that, my daughters ran outside and they were playing. They got on their bicycles and they was riding around and wasn't paying a lot of attention to where the kids were. But when the coffee was finally done, I came out, walked down the back steps, across the patio out there, got in my truck, and Started to back out, and I went about 3 feet, and I heard a crunch. Well, you guessed it. I hit the brakes on the truck, got her to stop, pulled it forward just a little bit, got out, looked behind it, and there, laying on the ground, was Kyle's bicycle. My daughters, they were riding with his daughter, Donnie's daughter, but Kyle, he'd come out of there, and I guess he'd turned around the corner there a little bit too sharp. And the gravel driveway there was just kind of wicked when you started turning corners on it if you didn't have full control. And he might have been going a little bit too fast, and that bicycle slid out from under him, and he went down on his knee. So he just pushed it over there and into my yard and just leaned it up against the back of my truck. So when I backed out, I crunched it. I picked that bicycle up and started to assess just how bad I damaged it. You know, it's a pretty new bicycle. Kyle was pretty proud of it. And we didn't have a lot of money. It wasn't like I could just go out and buy him a new one, but I just really hated that I tore that bicycle up. So I got it out, got it stood up, got to looking at it, and here's what I found. The handlebar had twisted and got bent down. It wasn't bent at all. It just moved around from its original location, so I knew I could fix that. That wasn't a big deal. And the seat on it was kind of turned just a little bit whopper-jawed, wasn't quite pointing down the tube there just like it should. And the front wheel had been knocked off. But nothing was permanently bent. Don't ask me how that happened. All I know is that's the way it ended up. So I thought, I can just grab some tools and I can have this fixed in just a few minutes. My old pickup was a 1971 GMC Sierra Grande. Top of the line in its day. And that was one of the few trucks that came with a toolbox compartment built in on the bed. So I walked around to the side of the truck, opened that up, and pulled my little toolbox out. It had everything I needed to fix it, which was basically a 9/16 inch wrench. Because everything on them bicycles was adjustable with a 9/16 inch wrench. Well, I grabbed that wrench out of there, and I started in on the handlebars. I figured, if I could get the handlebars fixed, then I could turn that bicycle over there and be a lot easier to put that front tire on, get it adjusted nice and straight. So I started in with it, and I got them tweaked around where they needed to be and adjusted and tightened up. While I had it standing there, I fixed that seat and adjusted it around to where it needed to be. And so then it was ready. And flipped it over on the top, had my back to the alley at the time, and all of a sudden I heard behind me someone just a-wailing. It was a kid. So I turned around and looked, and there was Kyle and neighbor Donnie. Now, at this point, I didn't have a clue why that bicycle was behind the truck. But Kyle came over there, and he had on a pair of shorts, and he had a big old bandage wrapped around his knee. And I asked Donnie, I said, "Donnie, What happened? Donnie proceeded to explain to me the calamity that had occurred and how Kyle had turned the corner and he must have had a low tire on his bicycle or something because it wasn't working exactly right, and the bicycle just tumped over and Kyle ended up going down on his knee. So I asked him, I said, Donnie, how bad was it? And he said, well, it's not too bad, I don't think. Said he got a little bit of blood, but boy, he's got a whole bunch of scraping on there. So we put that bandage on him, and I think he'll be okay, but he says it really hurts. I told Donnie, well, I'm sure sorry to hear that, Donnie, and I looked down there at his boy, and I said, hey, buddy, are you going to be all right? He looked back at me, and he's whimpering. He says, I don't think so. I replied that, if you just hold on just a little bit and you stop thinking about it, I think it'll be all right. It just takes a little bit of time and the pain will go away. That didn't really calm him down too much, but I didn't know what else to say. Then I looked back up at Donnie and I says, hey, Donnie, I need to tell you something. I was backing out of my driveway just a little while ago and I heard a crunch. And, well, I didn't know that Kyle's bicycle was back there behind my pickup. And I got to confess something to you, and that is I backed over it. And with that, his boy went from whimpering to wailing. I mean, he was just going off. And I looked over at him. I said, hey, it's not that bad. I said, I don't think I really tore anything up. I think it just needs some adjusting. And Donnie said, well, what's wrong with it? I said, well, the handlebar got bent out of alignment just a little bit, and the seat, it got kind of knocked to the side, but I already got those fixed. And I said, the only thing left to do is put this wheel on there. It shouldn't take too long. And I asked him, I said, Donnie, I showed you how to do this once before. Do you want the honors of putting that back on there? He said, yeah, I'll give it a try. So I handed him the wrench and tire. Didn't have those little clips on them in those days like they do now, those little retainer clips. So they're fairly simple to slip on there. And by the way, the main problem that you had with not having those clips on there wasn't when you were riding it, it's when you did wheelies. If those nuts were just a little bit loose on them front tires, well, when you came back down off that wheelie, sometimes you just have forks on the ground. But anyway, Donnie took hold of that tire and slipped it down in them front slots, and he tried to slip it in there, but I had to explain to him that he had to back the nuts off to get it loosened up enough it'd slip back on there. But anyway, after he kind of fiddled around with that for a little bit, he finally got it down in the slots and took that wrench and started tightening on it. And while he's tightening it, I asked him, I said, Donnie, you said you thought that tire might be a little bit low, but be what caused Kyle to skid out and have a wreck back there? He said, yeah, I think it's probably a low tire. And I said, well, why don't we just check it while we're at it? I got in that toolbox I had there, and I found the tire gauge that I kept, and checked the tire, and, well, to tell you the truth, it was only a couple pounds low. It wasn't much of anything. But I told him, I said, yep, that tire's a little bit too low. You see, there's one thing that I always tried to do when I was working with Donnie, and that was to let him have input on what he thought the problems were, and try to maintain his self-esteem, especially when his son was around. And so he thought that, every boy wants his dad to be a hero. So I played it up, and I told him, I said, that may be just exactly why that bicycle flipped over there. Why don't I go get the tire pump, and we'll pump that tire up? Donnie said, okay. Kyle's wailing was now back down to a whimper. And I said, Kyle, maybe we can teach you how to air up a tire on that bicycle. And most all y'all are familiar with them, but tire pumps in those days were made so that you put your 2 feet down on the bottom of the pump and held it in place, and you grabbed a hold of the T-handle at the top with both hands, and you just went up and down on it to pump the tire in. Well, I thought that ought to be something Kyle could do. So I put it over there, got it all hooked up to the tire, got it connected to the stem, and asked Kyle to come over there and showed him, made a couple pumps myself to show him how it worked. And I said, you think you can do that, buddy? And he looked at me, and tears still in his eyes, and he says, no, I don't. I think my knee hurts too much. So I told him it's going to be all right. That might have been the worst possible thing I could say to him. That just set him off. He went back to wailing, put his hand down there just above his knee, and he started saying, man, it hurts. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't think I can ride my bicycle. Just about that time, I heard my daughters and Donnie's daughter come down the alley there. So I told Donnie, I said, Donnie, I need somebody to test drive this bike. Need to find out whether or not I got it fixed right, and I need to see if the seat's the right height, and Kyle's about the only one who can do that. What do you think? Should I try to fix Kyle's knee? My daughters pulled in the yard about that time, and they came up there trying to figure out what was going on, and Donnie said, well, yeah, why don't you go ahead and have a look at his knee and see if you can do anything for it. And I told the girls, I said, well, Kyle skinned his knee up, and I'm going to take a look at it and see if I can make it feel any better. They just kind of stood there on the bicycle and stared at me. So I asked Kyle if he'd go over there and sit down and lean against the neighbor's fence and lay his leg out flat on the ground. And he kind of limped over there and made his way across, got over there, got situated, got sat down there by that fence. And I went over there and I reached down there and I said, now, Kyle, this is not going to hurt. I said, at that time, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were just starting to show up. They were just starting to be a big thing on the cartoons. And I told him, I said, I've heard from the ninjas that there are certain pressure points. And if you get a hold of them pressure points and you hold it just exactly right, they can take away the pain. He perked right up when I said ninjas. I don't know whether he knew what a real ninja was, but he knew what a Ninja Turtle was. So I got down there right next to him, and I put a hand just above his knee, around his little old lower thigh, just, I don't know, 2 inches or so maybe above his knee. And then I took the other hand and I wrapped it around his lower leg there, a couple inches below the knee. And I said, now, according to the ninjas, you got 2 pressure points here, and I'm going to squeeze a little bit. What I want you to do is I want you to tell me whenever the pain goes away. And he said, okay. So he's looking up there at me, and I'm kind of just taking my hand, just kind of squeezing and letting it go and squeezing and letting it go. Then all of a sudden, I take both hands and I just start to put pressure, just squeezing around there, getting a good old grip on it. Not enough to cut off circulation, but enough that he was going to feel that a lot more than he was his knee. And I just held that for just a little while. And I said, Kyle, is that working pretty good? And he says, well, it don't hurt much now. And I said, well, we got to hold this for just a few minutes. Hold on here. So for about the next 30 seconds, I had a little conversation about which one was his favorite turtle and what color bandana they wore on their head and all that kind of stuff. And he had all that information right there, and he started telling me a little bit about what his favorite was, the tools, the swords that they used. And, you know, we had a nice little conversation about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And all of a sudden I said, hey, Kyle, does it hurt anymore? And he said, no, it doesn't hurt at all. I said, well, the real trick will be when you stand up. From the angle my point of view was, Kyle was immediately in front of me, and Donnie was standing kind of, just past him along the fence there, kind of leaning on the fence, looking down there, watching what I was doing. And the 3 girls, they'd got off their bikes and they came over there, and they were kind of, so it's like just a little circle around there, watching what was happening. And so I'd asked Kyle, I said, Kyle, you want me to help you up? And he said, yes. And I said, well, keep your legs straight until you get up. So I looked over at my daughter's face, and they had kind of a grin on their face. And Donnie's daughter, she was pretty serious about it. And Don, he was just staring at everything that I was doing. So I reached down there, he grabbed my hand, and I said, now keep that leg straight. And I stood him up. He's standing there next to me, and I said, now here's what you got to do. First off, you're just going to put pressure on it, and you're not going to bend your knee. And I said, because we got to get that knee working again, okay? So he did. And he stood there, and he put pressure on. I said, does it hurt? And he says, no, it feels good. And I said, now what's going to happen is you're going to have a little burning, but it's not going to hurt. And you can live with the burning, can't you? And he said, well, I think so. And I said, what I want you to do is take 3 steps. So he goes out there and he takes 3 steps. And I said, how's that? And he said, that's a lot better. It don't hurt at all. And I said, well, now that should last most of the day. But could be this afternoon that it starts giving you some problems. So I reached into my back pocket, got my wallet out there, and I grabbed $4, and I handed them to Kyle, and I said, Kyle, I need you to do me a favor. You need to test that bike out, and I want you to ride it all day long, tell me just how it does, and I'll be back this afternoon, but I want you guys to take these $4 and go down there to the Dairy Queen, which is only about a block from our house. Go down there to the Dairy Queen and get dilly bars. And then this afternoon, y'all can come over and have them dilly bars. And I said, I'll check in with you to see how you did. He had a big old smile on his face. My daughters had a smile on their face. And he took that, and I said, you got a pocket? And he had a pocket. He was wearing jean shorts. Put it in his back pocket. And I said, now don't lose that. So I looked over at Donnie, and I said, hey, Donnie, I'm going to need your help. We need to watch him ride that bicycle so we can see whether or not it runs straight. I hit it pretty hard with the truck. I ain't for sure I got it exactly perfectly straight. So we need to watch him ride that bicycle, make sure it goes down the alleyway straight. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll walk down the alley a ways and you watch him from up here and we'll have him ride toward me. That way you can see what it looks like from the back and I can see what it looks like from the front. So we did. Kyle got on that bike, got lined up, and he started riding down that alley. And Don said, "Looks okay from here." And I said, "Yep, looks good from here." So as Kyle continued on down the driveway, I walked back up there toward the house. And just as I got to the yard there, my daughters were getting on their bikes. And my oldest daughter said to Donnie, said, "You know, Donnie, my dad can fix anything." Donnie said, "He sure can." So the girls, they took off down the alleyway on their bicycles, and Donnie and I were standing there, and I was kind of gathering up the tools and putting them back in my toolbox, and he said, "Where did you learn that trick from?" And I said, "Donnie, I got to tell you the truth. There are things called pressure points in the body." And I said, the ninjas knew all about that. They used to disable enemies and heal pain and do all kinds of things by pushing on pressure points. But I was talking about the real ninjas, the ones from like Japan. I wasn't talking about the Ninja Turtles. But when Kyle brought it up, I went with it. I said, "I'd really appreciate if you'd just keep that between me and you and not let Kyle know that I was talking about a different kind of ninja." And he looked at me and he said, "Your secret is safe with me." I looked right back at him with as straight a face as I could keep, and I said, "Donnie, I'd really appreciate that. We'll just keep that our little secret." And you know, to this day, I guarantee you, Kyle doesn't know that his knee wasn't cured by the Ninja Turtles. And if you ask my daughters about this story, they'll tell you that Donnie, his daughter, and Kyle are 100% convinced from then on that I'd healed Kyle's knee with ninja tricks. Few people have asked me if I ever see neighbor Donnie, and I have to tell you something. He passed away a few years back. He was someone that our whole family was mighty fond of. One of those gentle souls who didn't have an enemy in the world, just goodness of his heart, pure thought that he had. He never blamed anybody, never got mad, just took things as they came to him. And so I've been recording these stories as kind of a tribute to Donnie. And I don't know if you've seen the other stories I recorded about him, but I have a playlist on it. And if you like to, you can go back and listen to those stories. And I've tried to treat him with respect and let you know that he was one of those guys that just brought a smile to my face every time I saw him. So at any rate, I do have a couple more stories about neighbor Donnie that I may record when I get around to them. I'm recording these so that my daughters and my family, people who know him, get that one last glimpse, kind of as a tribute. So if you like the story, let me know. Leave a note in the comments. I'd appreciate hearing what you have to say about it. I do appreciate you watching, and you have nothing less than a wonderful day.